Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's NAC at Home program. My name is Nadine Heidinger, and I'm the Director of Communications at the National Arts Club. For those of you who are not familiar with the National Arts Club, we are a 501c3 nonprofit based in New York City with a mission to stimulate, foster, and promote public interest in the arts. Annually, we host over 150 free programs to the public, including exhibitions, theatrical and musical performances, lectures, and readings. To find out more about the National Arts Club, you can visit us at nationalartsclub.org, or you can find us on Instagram and Facebook. On behalf of our Architecture Committee, the President of the National Arts Club, and the Board of the National Arts Club, it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's event on Black architects. Our speaker on the topic, Robert Arthur King, FAIA architect, has taught at the New York School of Interior Design since 1988. He's a graduate of Columbia University and the Architectural Associate Graduate School in London. In addition, he has published 3 books. His practice is focused in the restoration of historic buildings in New York City. Following the discussion will be a brief Q&A, so please feel free to use the Q&A function for any questions you might have. And without further ado, Robert, please take it away, and everyone please enjoy the presentation.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to get my screen up and the beginning. Okay, this lecture is about architects born in the 19th century. There are many architects born during that time, and they were faced with much discrimination toward them. As minority architects, they achieved projects both nationally and internationally, with great odds working against them within the American society. I focus on architects who were born Black in the 19th century and their contribution and achievements to the architectural profession. From Robert Robinson Taylor to Paul Revere Williams, Black architects have contributed significantly to architecture in the 20th century in all styles, from Beaux Arts, ranging from Art Deco to the international style. These 5 architects may not have won awards, but with the odds against them during their time in the society they lived in, their architectural work can and should be considered award-winning. Without their energy and tenacity, I and countless other Black architects would not be architects today if it wasn't for their individual achievements. Harriet Tubman was an American abolitionist and political activist. During the American Civil War, she served as an armed scout and spy for the Union Army in her later years. Tubman was an activist and a movement of the women's suffragette. Paul Dunbar was an American poet, novelist, and short story writer of the late 19th and earliest 20th century. Booker T. Washington was an American educator, author, orator, and advisor to several presidents of the United States. Washington was the last generation of Black American leaders born in slavery and became leading voices of the former slaves and their descendants. Robert Robinson Taylor graduated from MIT in 1992. His greatest achievement was designing many of the buildings in Tuskegee Institute. He's the first American student enrolled in the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and the first accredited African-American architect when he graduated in 1892. On the left is his graduating class, and he sits right here. But also in this photograph, this is Sonia Hayden. and she was the designer of the Women's Pavilion in the Fair of 1893. This is Robinson's architectural class. His thesis project was a home for retired soldiers. When Booker T. Washington solicited him to work at Tuskegee, he did many of the buildings in Tuskegee, most of them in the shingle style or just a typical style of the time. Chapel in Tuskegee. When Andrew Carnegie, a great philanthropist, donated money for libraries around the United States, Taylor did one in Salisbury, North Carolina. The Colored Masonic Temple in Birmingham, Alabama. Another Carnegie Library in Texas. Veterinarian Hospital in Tuskegee. He also did Booker T. Washington's home in Tuskegee, called the Oaks. Huntington Hall in Tuskegee. A hospital in Tuskegee, a memorial chapel in Selma, Alabama. Academy in Tuskegee, Girls Senior College in Tuskegee, Tanham Hall, and Tompkins Dining Hall, and all in Tuskegee. So I'm not sure whether many of these buildings are still standing. I've not been to Tuskegee, but he was a prominent architect there, and he also taught there as well. Dormitory, Memorial Hall, Girls Bathhouse, and Douglas Hall in Tuskegee. While most of his work focused on Tuskegee, he did several other buildings around the United States, mostly in the South. But he's one of the architects that usually gets ignored and overlooked in his work. Carter Woodson was an American historian, author, journalist, and founder of the Association for the Study of African Americans' Life and History. Woodson also would be called the father of Black history. James Weldon Johnson was an American writer and civil rights activist. He wrote the lyrics to Lift Every Voice and Sing, which later became known as the Negro National Anthem. Julian Francis Abele graduated from the University of Pennsylvania in 1902, and he's the primary designer of Duke University. He was the chief architect for Horace Trumbauer. Trumbauer did not do many of the design because he was dyslexic. So he sponsored Abele to his education, his travels to Europe to become one of the major designers. And Abele designed over 400 buildings. On the left is Abele and Horace Trumbauer, and on the right is the staff. And I believe this is Abele there in the photo. This is the Architectural Society at the University of Pennsylvania, and there's Abele in the middle. This is Duke University. When it was being built, and Abele designed when being built, Abele was not allowed or could not get a room to stay overnight to visit the site. The rooms were not rented to blacks. So it was very difficult, but he designed everything in this on the camp, the major layout and the campus. And it wasn't until 1988 that he was recognized as the designer of the university, and they've named a Abele quad after him in the center with a bust of Abele himself. The main chapel, the rendering on the left and the actual building on the right, has been copied by many other universities. My granddaughter went to Boston College, and they have the same building at their campus. One of the hospital, one of the buildings at Duke University done by Abele. And you'll notice on the lower right, his name is mentioned along with Trumbauer's name. Another, the stadium at Duke with Abele's name put there on the side. And some of the photographs I've achieved of the university campus. Because of Trumbauer's connection with the people of the Gilded Age, he did many buildings around and for members of the Gilded Age. This is Harvard University Library, done in 1913. The Duke Mansion in New York, the Sprer Mansion also in New York, and this is all because of Trumbauer's connections. And these three other row houses in New York. The Strauss building on the left, built in 1930, 9 East 71st Street, was also the home of Jeffrey Spriten, whose past house. A residence in New Jersey. This building is now part of Monmouth University in Asbury Park, New Jersey. Another residence in Newport, part of the Gilded Age. Mausoleum in Philadelphia, a free library in Philadelphia. While these are very typical buildings of the time, I think stepping out at that time was a little risky for many architects. A hotel in Peoria and one in Philadelphia. The Union League in Philadelphia. A rendering of the Belmont Mansion in Washington, D.C. Baker Residence or Mansion in Washington. And this is the Philadelphia Museum of Art, which really became famous after Rocky's movie with him doing exercises on the steps. Conti Cullen was an American poet, novelist, children's writer, and playwright, particularly well known during the Harlem Renaissance. Adam Clayton Powell Sr. was an American pastor who developed the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem, New York, as the largest Presbyterian congregation in the country with 10,000 members. And Claudius McKay was a Jamaican writer and poet and a central figure during the Harlem Renaissance in 1919. He wrote, "If We Must Die," one of his best known works. Vertner Woodson Tandy, a graduate of Tuskegee Institute in 1905 and Cornell University in 1907. He is founder of Alpha Phi Alpha, which is also known as the Seven Jewels, on Cornell University, the first African-American architect registered in New York State, the first African-American to pass the military commissioning examination, and was commissioned to first lieutenant. He also created the firm of Tandy and Foster, who I will talk about later. Abyssinian St. Philip's Church in New York, built in 1910, and some of his members was W.E. Du Bois, Thurgood Marshall, and Langston Hughes. The Elks Lodge and the Ivy Delph apartment houses on Hamilton Terrace, where I used to live, and I remember it being built. Madam C.J. Walker. She was the first woman millionaire in the United States. And this is her townhouse in Manhattan on 136th Street, which naturally she hired the best, of course. And this is an interior. Not sure whether he did the interior or not. That I'm not sure of. And this is the 1915. Another photograph of her, the interior of her house. Villa Luardo in Irving on the Hudson, 1917, also a home that Tandy designed for Madam C.J. Walker. This was a comparable for many American Blacks to San Simeon. This is the place where people went, you socialized, you rubbed elbows with all of the prominent Black people of the time. And this is a photograph of 1917 during a obviously a social function. W.E.B. Du Bois was an American socialist, historian, civil rights activist, Pan-Americanist, author, writer, and educator. He was the first African-American to earn a doctoral degree. Du Bois was one of the founders of the NAACP in 1909. Mary Ovington was an American suffragette, journalist, and co-founder of the NAACP. And Madam C.J. Walker, who I mentioned, she was recorded as the first female self-made millionaire in America in the Guinness Book of Records. Paul Revere Williams graduated from the University of Southern California. He was known as Architect of the Stars, the movie stars, that is. He was the first African-American architect licensed west of the Mississippi. And in 1957, he became the first Black architect to be honored and elevated to fellowship and membership into the American Institute of Architects. One of his most famous projects is LAX Airport, which you'll see there on the right. He designed that, I think, with others in 1961. Frank Sinatra's residence in 1956. Barbara Stanwyck's residence in 1936. Morris Landau's residence in Bel Air. Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball's residence in Palm Springs. One of the things I noticed from studying his work, most of his work have a curve in it, a circle or a curve. And that was seemed to be his signature mark. Bert Lahr's residence, even the carpet is a curve. Nauru residence in California. Cornell residence in Beverly Hills. Joseph Harris residence in Bel Air. And most of these were Hollywood people who were connected. Dave Chasen residence in 1953. Even the walkway was curved. Crosby residence in 41. Lon Chaney Sr., Everett Crosby residence. So he was quite, one of the interesting things about him, Wilson, is that he could sketch upside down. In other words, the client would be on the opposite side of the table as he would print and sketch. And this was to make them so they wouldn't feel uncomfortable sitting next to a Black man. Paley's house. The Ambassador Hotel, I think is still standing. Aerosmith Hotel. The Beverly Hills Hotel. The Chasen Restaurant, which I think is famous. The Wilshire Hotel in 58. Another hotel in Palm Springs. He was basically, he did one building in New York on 127th Street, a public school. Sunset Apartment, Saks Fifth Avenue. the Palm Springs Tennis Club. I have no idea whether he became a member or not, thinking of the times. The Baptist Church, and the Second Church of Christ. Many Black architects got started doing churches because that was a place that, for those born in the 19th century, because that was a foundation where people could gather legally, minorities. And this hotel in Colombia, South America. The mark that he has made as far as an architect, several books have been written about him in the last, I'd say, 20 years. But prior to that, many minority architects were basically not really noticed or didn't, what I feel, get the due that they deserved. Schomburg was an historian, writer, collector, and activist. Over the years, he collected literature, art, slave narratives, and other materials of African history, which were purchased by the New York Public Library, and which created the Schomburg Library in Harlem. Langston Hughes was an American poet, socialist, novelist, playwright, and columnist. He famously wrote about the period that the Negro was in vogue, which later paraphrased as when Harlem was in vogue. Isaac Murphy was an American Hall of Fame jockey. Murphy was the only jockey to win the Kentucky Derby, the Kentucky Oaks, and the Clark Handicap in the spring of 1884. John Lewis Woodson, graduated from Columbia University in 1928. He studied at Dillard University before going to Columbia University. And some of the other people who went to Dillard were Martin Luther King Sr., Andrew Young, and Coretta Scott King. In 1977, he was elected to the College of Fellows, the American Institute of Architects, and he became a registered architect in 1930. I did my apprenticeship under Mr. Wilson. His most famous buildings is the Harlem River Houses in New York, designed in 1936. One of the few public housing that has an extensive waiting list. There were commercial shops, many of the living rooms and kitchens, you could see the playground so one could watch their children. 5 architects were hired to do this project. 4 were paid $5,000 and 1 was paid $2,500. These are some of the photographs of the Harlem River Houses when it was first built. The playgrounds, the environment is very conducive for one to live in. It wasn't like the modern day apartment houses or public housing of 20 and 30 stories. These were limited to 5 and 6 story buildings. And the formula that he used, that people can relate to 7 people. And once it gets beyond that, you have alienation. This was done, there are books on these type of associations now, but this Mr. Wilson did in 1936. Also, there were hired sculptors for sculptural art to be put in the housing to give it a more of a flavor, a more of a warm feeling for people to live. The playground, you notice many of them are sunken. And I'm not sure why that was done. There were ramps, there were stairs. It wasn't handicapped adaptable, but it was designed for elderly people. Mr. Wilson, who his day job, he worked for the Parks Department, and at night is when he did his work. He was more of a community architect, doing boiler rooms, converting buildings to being SROs and things of that nature. Most of his credit that I attribute to is his encouraging minority architects to complete their education and join the American Institute of Architects, and to work for their community. And these are some of the drawings that I acquired that he did. This is the Friendship Baptist Church in Harlem, a restaurant, bar restaurant on 125th Street. Behind my pages. The Convent Avenue Baptist Church, where he did some work for, a law office, and this is all hand drawn. A residence house, St. Mark's Church, which I worked on with him on. His contribution, which is and starting also a scholarship fund in the AIA for minority architects, should never be ignored, and was, I think, I owe him a lot personally. Ida Wells was an American investigator, journalist, educator, and early leader in the civil rights movement. She was one of the founders of the NAACP. Era Hurston was an American author, anthropologist, and filmmaker. She also wrote more than 50 short stories, plays, and essays. Marcus Garvey was a Jamaican political activist and publisher, a journalist, entrepreneur, and orator. President of the Black Star Line shipping and passenger company, designed to forge a link between North America and Africa, and facilitated African Americans to migrate to Libya. My grandaunt was a nurse on the Black Star. The Negro State Exhibition buildings. In the Communist Fair of 1893, there was nothing to honor American Blacks or Negroes. So in turn, in 1895, the Cotton Exhibition and several other exhibitions around the United States had Negro pavilions. Walter Bailey graduated from the University of Urbana in Champaign in 1900, the second Black to graduate. He also taught at Tuskegee Institute, the first licensed African American in the state of Illinois. Caswell graduated from Cornell University in 1919, designed buildings for Howard University, and was a member of Alpha Phi Alpha. Edwards graduated from Cornell University in 1908 and taught at Shaw University in Raleigh, and the first Black architect licensed in the state of North Carolina. Oh my God. George Washington Foster graduated from Cooper Union in 1889, the second licensed Black architect in New Jersey, and he also worked for Henry Janeway Hardenberg on the original Waldorf Astoria. Among the first African-American architects licensed in the state of New Jersey in 1908 and later in New York in 1916. Herman, one of the few women architects that I could find. She attended Hampton Institute and Chicago Technical College. She designed over 200 churches and residential buildings in Virginia and 2 churches in Libya. Garrett graduated from the University of Southern California in 1930, described as pivotal Black avant-garde modernist of the 1940s. Langford attended Lincoln Institute and Tuskegee Institute, the first professional African-American architect in Virginia in 1922 and in the District of Columbia in 1924. Pittman attended Tuskegee Institute and Drexel Institute in Philadelphia, and he taught at Tuskegee Institute as well. Rayfield, Pratt Institute and Columbia University in 1899, second educated African-American architect in the US. I mentioned he taught at Tuskegee. Robinson, Columbia University in 1924, and a master's degree in 1931, and also attended the University of Berlin. He also worked for Vertner Tandy. He was a professor at Howard University and also designed several buildings at Hampton and at Howard University. Russell, Hampton Institute in 1899, and he taught drafting at Tuskegee Institute. Wigington, he more so did an apprenticeship, but he was the first Black municipal architect for 34 years in the state of St. Paul, Minnesota. Mary Lewis, she was a sculptor. She was the first African-American sculptor to achieve national and then international prominence. Geer was a physician and the first African-American woman licensed to practice medicine in the United States, in the state of Georgia. Frederick Roberts was a newspaper owner and editor and the first known man of African-American descent elected to the California State Assembly. He was also the great-grandson of Sally Hemings. Garrett Morgan, he was an African-American inventor, businessman, and community leader. He invented the 3-position traffic light. Marian Anderson, an African-American contralto, performed opera and spiritual and major concerts, recital venues throughout the United States and Europe. And Burroughs, she was a Black educator, orator, religious leader, civil rights activist, feminist, and businesswoman in the United States in 1909, and she founded the National Training School for Women and Girls. Boyd, she was one of the 16 founders of Alpha Phi Alpha and the first sorority founder of African-American women students at Howard University. Hayes was a noted lyric tenor and composer. Hayes was one of the first African-American concert artists to be recorded in 1939. And Alexander, she was an African-American lawyer who was first to receive a PhD in economics in the United States. Elijah McCoy was a Canadian American engineer who invented lubricating systems for steam engines. The term that we use now, the real McCoy, comes from him in the switching mechanism for trains. Peyton was an African-American real estate entrepreneur, known as founder of Harlem. He purchased several buildings that were initially not allowed for Blacks to move in. And after his purchase, they moved in these 5 buildings. And Oliver was an American jazz concert player and band leader. He was a mentor and teacher of Louis Armstrong. While I focused on these 5 architects who were born in the 19th century, there are many born in the 20th and 21st century whose work needs to be noted and their contribution to the profession be recognized. Thank you. Okay.
Oops, I'm muted. Sorry about that.
It's
Wonderful.
all right.
Thank you, Robert. Sorry for the lateness, and I apologize to you and the audience. But thank you all again for joining for this program. And we'll begin our Q&A session. If you had to pick 1 or 2 projects that exemplify excellent African-American architecture, which would they be? Or to put it another way, who are like the Ella and Lewis of architecture?
I would say Paul Revere Williams, with his work, I would really note as some of the work that would be recognized. There have been several books written about him at this time, recognizing his achievements. Particular buildings, it's a lot harder to do from the research, but I would say Williams would be the one I would pick out as the most prolific and did more buildings than I think many of the others did.
Got you. Yeah, being in LA, originally born in LA, I wanted to ask you before I ask the next question, and I don't know if you might have mentioned this. I heard that he could draw upside down
Yeah.
perspective for his clients, so that they could see the perspective right from their point of view. Did you talk about that at
Talk
all?
about that. And he did that because he felt that some of the white clients would be uncomfortable if he sat next to them, is why he learned to render
Right.
print upside down.
I heard that, but that actually takes a huge amount of skill.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
All right, next question. And I think I just wanted to agree with you.
It's okay, no problem.
He is so great. Next comes from Rika, or Reka, sorry if I mispronounced your name, Esther Zviza. She thanks you for your presentation and asks if you have any favorite buildings around the world and which are your favorite from Black architects.
Oh, I would say the school in New York that Williams did on 130th Street and Madison Avenue. It's a very kind of Art Deco, but kind of a modern school building that he did. That's in New York. I think that would be one of my favorite buildings, which I could not get any photographs of.
Right, it's right here in New York.
New York City, about 130th Street and Madison Avenue,
Great,
East Side.
great. This is a great simple question from Fred Pospisil. What was the influence of American Black architects internationally?
What influenced them?
No, what was the influence that they had? I think the question is internationally.
Yeah, internationally, I'm not really sure of those architects. I think more current architects, more the indigenous kind of environment, the more natural or man-made. But at that time, I think most of them, you copied and did what was done throughout the country. You know, I don't think there was much international influence from what I have found. I couldn't find anything at all. I think now with the access to many books and the media, I think you have in more vernacular architecture is really explored now more than it was then.
Well, but Paul R. Williams, he seemed to be like pretty influential. Well, I don't know, chicken or the egg type thing, but his folded plate construction and his LAX building, they seem pretty iconic. Maybe those were.
His influence, I don't know. The main thing for me is that he did curves.
Yeah.
Circles and curves in almost all of his work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
Yes.
All right. Another question. The invention of the 3-position traffic light inspires the question of who the African-American urban planners who had influences may be. Oh, good question. That I think he's saying possibly for your next Zoom. So African-American planners.
Yeah, but the biggest plan that I know is the one that Abele did for Duke University. As far as major plans like that, I don't know of any of those born in the 1800s that did such a large plan. I don't know whether Roberts did a plan of Tuskegee, where that was a major overall layout. It appeared from what I could found or discovered that it was more put a building here, put a building there at that time.
Great. Of the many buildings built in the earliest 20th century, are a lot still standing or some still standing?
Some are still standing. I've not visited. I've tried to explore like on the internet and things like that, but some of the buildings are, some are not. Many of the mansions by Abele in New York are still, many of them are still standing that I know. And in the buildings that were done in Philadelphia and some of the mansions in Newport, they would be still standing.
Great. Yeah, those are wonderful. I have a question from Sydney Anderson. She says, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. And we've had a lot of congratulations on a great presentation. Did you find any surprises in your research about the challenges that these architects had to overcome?
I think my conversations more so with Mr. Woodson about the difficulty. People you call, they come to the office, find out he's Black, and then he's not retained. Those were the most difficult parts. I think until you prove yourself and then prove yourself again and then prove yourself again. It was some of it like a glass ceiling trying to achieve. Woodson was the most successful, I think, of all of them. And Albee, because of Horst Trumbauer and him sponsoring him. But many of the other architects did not achieve such a renowned fame as Woodson did.
Right. All right, next question from Heather Castle. You mentioned Williams' particular curved style that was distinctively his in architecture. There any other specific details or styles that would denote African American style that marks architecture?
Not of those architects born in the 19th century, I would say no. Just Wilson's the only one. And I mean, I've looked at I have many more buildings that I have not shown, but I didn't notice any particular unique feature in their design except for Wilson.
Got you.
The one that I really could actually say there is something there.
Right. So it might be, so you might have to, again, we'll push you to perhaps do architects in the 20th century or 21st and 20th century because it's a little bit more of a historic context.
Oh yeah.
You might.
One of the reasons doing architects born in the 20th century, I will have to leave someone out, and that's difficult.
Right.
While in the 19th century, whoever left out, they're not alive anyway, so
I see.
not going to get too many complaints.
You're
cold.
You're already cold down your subject matter. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, makes sense.
I don't want to make anybody feel upset because I didn't include them. So
Right. Yeah, there's just so many more now, which is
yeah,
wonderful.
many more. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Can you discuss some of the getting builders and municipal approvals because of their race? I think the question is about whether or not they may have had difficulty getting approvals from municipalities or builders because of their race.
I would say yes, because I've experienced some myself in not these times, but I think probably, but I mean, when you're doing Tuskegee Institute, which is a Black institution, I don't think there'd be difficulty. I think because of Williams, his prominence, he wouldn't have difficulty. And Albee working for Horst Trumbauer, he wouldn't have difficulty. When I worked with Mr. Woodson, he would go down to the department himself and talk to people. And I think with his distinction and the way he was, he got things approved. So there wasn't much. There's less now because everything's electronic. But going down to the building department in the up until I guess 2015, 16, sometimes there would be a little back off on getting things approved and going through more circles than normal.
Got you. Yeah, that makes sense. Having latitude, some latitude at the building department seems to help sometimes.
Yeah.
Next question is from Jose Cruz. He says, you mentioned John Lewis Wilson. I missed your comment on the role he played in your life. Can you elaborate further, please? And Jose spent the summer of 1970 in his office.
I had many conversations with him. I would go to his office for years, celebrated his 90th birthday party at my house. And we would talk for hours just about architecture, some of the hurdles that he had to go through. It was just fascinating. When he went to Columbia University, they had a sketch modeling class with a naked model, and he got an A without attending class. Things like that occurred. Being paid $2,500 while all the other architects were paid $5,000, and he did all the work. He did all the design and everything. So things like that we discussed and talked about. We talked about modern architecture. We talked about lifestyle, designing for different ethnic groups, and what one should consider. The reward, I know we discussed it, the reward on a job is getting the last check without a fight. That would be important. And serving your client, making sure that they are served. Many architects, or someone, they design to win an award, but the real award is pleasing your client. And I think that to be the most important thing. But we would talk about subjects like that. Yes.
Great, thank you. The next question is, did any of the architects address segregation in their building designs? For example, separate entrances, water fountains, etc. Was that done then?
Not for them. No,
No. They weren't
didn't.
in places where that was done.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think with Duke University, while Abele was not to attend and even watch over the construction, there may have been, but I have no record of that. I don't know if Blacks were allowed to attend Duke University at that time.
Yeah. It's sort of on the border there.
Yeah.
Who was the Black architect on the Harlem State Office building? Can you name some of Pratt Institute's famous Black architects?
Conrad and Johnson, they did the State Office building in Harlem, also known as the SOB. They did that. I met Johnson, Conrad Johnson, but Eiffel Johnson. Those are the two architects who did that building. I don't know of, I think one Black architect I did mention attended Pratt Institute in the turn of the century. I can't remember which one. But just Eiffel Johnson, they did the Harlem State Office building. Yeah, it was Rayfield. He attended Pratt Institute in the late 1800s and then Columbia University in 1899.
Right. Next question. Seems to be a lot built in Beverly Hills in California. Coincidence, or did you just highlight these?
I did not focus on the area. I focused on the people that he designed for. But that's where many of the stars lived, in Beverly Hills, and during the 30s, 40s, and 50s. So that's why he did many of the buildings there. I mean, there's maybe about 100 other buildings that I left out that he did in California for the stars.
Yeah. Well, he was prolific and gifted and capable, you might say. And so that seems to be, you know, he just got a lot done and got a lot of work as a result.
Yeah, for one, he was an orphan, I think, by the age of 7, and lived in foster homes. So the odds of his success were slim, and he made it. He was determined
Really
to make
incredible.
it. Yes.
Yeah. All right, next one is from Heather Castle. I'm surprised by how many notable buildings, LAX hotels, etc., were built by African-American architects, other than Duke University finally naming a quad and placing a statue in the quad to honor Abele.
Mhm.
There are plaques, brief histories, or building websites. Sorry, the question is, are there plaques, brief histories on building websites, or something to note who the architects were? I know as a travel writer that some hotels have mentioned when they're designed by women architects.
As far as I know now, beside Duke, I don't know of any other building that has a plaque of a African-American architect on it. Not that
Got
I'm, yeah. I mean,
Well, I'll tell you that that's a good segue, because
Yeah.
I often don't mention upcoming programs necessarily. But you're doing a program next month on women architects. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Yes,
Sorry, and that's March 15th next month.
yeah. I started doing the lectures on architects of the 19th century because I took a course at Columbia University with Edgar Kaufman Jr., the son of falling water. And my assignment was to do something on Frank Lloyd Wright. I looked at his early works, which was my project, and I noticed his drafting was less than average. And then in 1892, he became superb, and that doesn't happen. So I researched it and found it was Marion Lucy Mahoney who did all of the renderings, the interiors for him. And she graduated from MIT in 92 with Robinson. And so I got interested in researching her. And then from there, I looked at Julia Morgan, who is known for doing San Simeon, but totally ignoring she did 700 other buildings. And also the first woman to graduate from the École des Beaux Arts. And so the odds of both of those women, plus many others, their achievements, I just got interested and did women. And then I did Black architects. And then I did Jewish architects. And I'm working on Spanish and Asian architects now, born in the 1800s.
Fantastic.
Yeah, right. You just the odds, the glass ceiling that they looked up at was very difficult to break.
Yeah.
And some broke through.
Great. All right. That's going to be very exciting. I'm
Yeah.
big fans of both of those women that you just mentioned. Being a Berkeley guy, I know a lot about Julia Morgan, but I'm always wanting to learn more. And our final question, follow up, could you please spell out the name of the women that did Wright's drafting? Mahoney?
Marion Lucy Mahoney. And she married Walter Burley Griffin later, but I still call her Mahoney. She also designed, well, they entered a competition to do the city of Canberra in 1912. All the drawings are done by her hand.
Wow.
When asked, did she design the buildings? Her answer was, my husband's name is on the drawings. So it's still my belief she designed the city of Canberra.
Amazing.
Not Walter Burley Griffin.
Amazing.
So
there we have not just an architect, but an urban planner, city designer as well coming up.
Her work is superb.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you look at the Wright's drawings, they're just not his, but hers for Wright's projects. I mean, you can see she may have had a lot of influence on the design as well, but certainly the drawings just by themselves are so nice.
She's attributed to doing the interiors.
Amazing.
Buildings, yes.
Amazing. All right. Well, that was our last question. I want to thank everybody again very much for attending this evening's program. My apologies again for not being on the first part, but we certainly appreciate it. And please keep an eye out for this upcoming program next month, and we'll let you know about more and other great programs. Once again, thank you all from the National Arts Club, and we'll see you next time.
Okay, so long. Bye, everyone.
Bye.